You know, for the crisis we've talked about, Ukraine, had there been no NATO push to Ukraine, there would have been no war. For Taiwan, if the United States says, look, Taiwan is part of China, and we're not going to arm Taiwan because Taiwan's part of China, Beijing says don't arm Taiwan, that war is avoided. So it's not complicated to avoid these wars or to end these wars. When it comes to the Middle East, it's as simple as that as well, in my view, which is that there needs to be a state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel on the borders of the 4th of June, 1967. And that is what the International Court of Justice, the UN Security Council, the UN General Assembly, the Arab League, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the BRICS, and essentially every other part of the world other than Israel and the United States have said. So in terms of what to do, and I should add, within Europe, while it's said to do that, Germany, the UK, and I wouldn't say half of the EU, but major parts of the EU behave miserably, like you said, and Germany shockingly so. By the way, closing down your participation was such a vulgar abuse of power. But then we know it continues. The Israeli ambassador to Germany called the Free University of Berlin, as you know very well, and said, you can't have the UN Special Rapporteur
Yeah,
on
that's right.
Palestine give a talk. And they closed it down,
Yep.
which is, I can't say unbelievable because it's perfectly predictable, but it's so vulgar, it's shocking. So, what do I think? I'm not giving up because maybe I'm just hopelessly naive on this, but I hope not. And that is, I count the votes in the UN General Assembly, where I spend a lot of time, and more than 180 countries support the two-state solution. And the ones that don't are Israel. And Israel, look, it's led by a completely criminal, extremist government, criminal in the sense that it's violating the Genocide Convention, and its prime minister it has an arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court for good reason. So you have Israel opposing this. You have a handful of countries that always side with the United States, like Micronesia, because it has actually a compact with the U.S. that it has to vote with the United States on foreign policy. Nauru, Palau, uh, Papua New Guinea, with all due respect, and occasionally Paraguay and Argentina. Okay, that's about it. The rest of the world, and I made a count recently, 95% of the world population live in countries that have said squarely, we need two states. So, how far away is that? Well, it's one veto away because this came up to a vote in the UN Security Council in 2024, and there were 12 votes for Palestine to enter the UN as the 194th UN member state. There were two abstentions, the UK and Switzerland, and there was
Wow.
one veto, the United States of America. And in the UN General Assembly, where it went afterwards, there were 180 plus votes for the two-state solution, advising the UN Security Council to get on with it. I speak almost every day with very senior officials in the Arab League countries, foreign ministers and others. Everyone is, of course, it's the Arab Peace Initiative since 2002, is for the two-state solution. I spoke recently with the leaders in Indonesia, in Malaysia, who are part of the contact group for Palestine. Of course, they're supporting the two-state solution. The entire Organization of Islamic Cooperation, 57 countries, aligns with the two-state solution. So this is basically a kind of simple question. Could the United States face down this extremist, violent, criminal government? And the answer is it could, for a basic reason that is not naive. None of this is in America's true interest. It's not that America is benefiting from using Israel as its bulwark in the Middle East. No. The United States is paying a heavy price because it's run by the Israel lobby when it comes to Middle East policy. It's a corruption that is absolutely shocking how much money goes from pro-Israel groups to the Congress and buys them off. And by the way, it's so interesting because we're a crazy country. Much of this is Christian Zionism, extremist, fundamentalist, biblical literalist. We got to get all the Jews there so we can have the second coming of Christ, the so-called dispensational view, or the millenarianism, which has been part of Anglo-Saxon fundamentalist Protestantism. And if you go to history, where did Zionism originate? Not with Theodor Herzl in the 1890s, but with British Protestants. And it actually goes back to the 1600s. But the real Zionism of the 19th century was British fundamentalists who didn't want Jews living in Britain, by the way. They wanted them.
And